Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Jocelyn, I'm going to hand it off to you to kick off our meeting.
Great. Happy to be here and to see everyone. And again, I think for those joining us, the Workforce Council is putting their names and representation in the chat. So we won't spend time on a lot of introductions, but glad to have everybody here and have an opportunity to provide an update on some of the ongoing work that we're doing around building our new systems to support educators. I think we have a number of different pieces in flight, all of which are building towards supporting a new and significantly redesigned credential. And we will provide an update on that work at the end of the meeting today, but we also particularly want to focus today on some of the IT development and sort of associated thinking about the opportunities with data that we're currently engaged in, because that a new IT system, I think for everybody that has worked with our educator focused systems, is really essential to the success of any future credential. So that is one piece that we're starting to move on right now. And so Jessie Murray is here to give you an update on a scope that we've put out and are in the process of procuring for a new system, and to provide some information about some of the details of what we are looking for in that system. And then we're also joined by Dr. Pierre Koronegan from Boston University, who is, we're very fortunate to have her as a research fellow connected with the EC. So she is at the Wheelock Educational Policy Center and really tasked to work directly with EC around thinking about our data and the ways in which we're using the data that we have, with a particular attention to how we're supporting our planning and development of our systems for our workforce. So we're actually going to kick off with Pia providing an overview of the review that she's done in looking at the systems that we currently have, and highlighting some of the points of consideration for us in terms of thinking about how we could be working with our data and what types of data we might want to connect into our systems. And then we'll move into Jessie's presentation to provide you with an overview of where we're going with our IT systems, which should, I think, dovetail nicely with some of the things that Pia is calling out. And then we will provide an update on where we are with the credentialing system. So I think at this point, Addison, unless you have anything else, any other business that you want to attend to, we could probably jump into the slides.
I don't know any, no more business, but just the slides that I will be sharing will be sent out after the meeting, and they will also be posted online. I will send you all the link. And for those of you just joining, please make sure whenever you chat, please make sure to chat to everyone, not just hosts and panelists. Thank you very much.
Great. So, Pia, would you mind introduce, while Addison's pulling up the slides, introduce yourself and just share a little bit about sort of how this work has been funded and where you are sitting right now?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jocelyn, and thanks everyone for having me here today. As Jocelyn noted, I'm Pia Karanongan. I'm on the research faculty at Boston University's College of Education and Human Development, and I'm affiliated with the Wheelock Educational Policy Center. Wheelock, we call WEPIC for short, to help it roll off the tongue a little bit better, has several research policy partnerships in place with various state and local as well as federal efforts. So we're happy to have this partnership with the EC, and I'll tell you more about that as we dive in here. But Addison, if you could move to the next slide, please. Maybe 2 slides, 3, 1 more. Yeah, great. So there has been a lot of discussion nationally about the challenges faced by the early educator workforce and how best to support them. And separately or alongside that, calling for more and better data and research. So really, with my colleague Megan Combe at WEPIC, we wrote a paper to more specifically consider what that means for building data and research capacity in Massachusetts in particular. Next slide, please. So I'll start with a brief stock take, and I acknowledge I probably don't have to spell this out for many or all of you on this call, but just to set a foundation for all of us, we know that early educators face challenging economic prospects, and that's true nationally as well as here in Massachusetts. Although prospects have improved some since the pandemic and that wages have grown a little bit, they are still not at the level that they need to be. And as a result of that, the turnover issues remain and are quite pervasive. About a quarter of educators leave each year, and a quarter to a third of centers have high turnover rates, meaning with 20% or more of their educators leaving. Next slide. So given all these challenges, there's general consensus that strategies to support the educator workforce really need to attend to multiple dimensions of their experiences, from their economic well-being to supporting their physical and psychological well-being, but also providing opportunities to build important competencies and facilitate career progression, and enabling a supportive work environment. Next slide. And here in Massachusetts, Massachusetts has taken a multi-pronged approach, and this slide shows some examples of the various investments that have been made, and I acknowledge this doesn't even cover all of those investments, including some that are still in the works. But next slide. So, however, there are key questions about the educator workforce and those investments that we don't have answers to at this time. And the first group of questions really relates to what is working, who's in the workforce, and what are their competencies and skills, who is accessing the different workforce supports that are available, and how are those supports affecting the recruitment, retention, and career progression of early educators. The second set of questions relates to how we can make it better. Are there barriers to accessing available supports? How do the outcomes differ for educators from different backgrounds and different qualifications? And also, how do staffing outcomes and turnover patterns differ for programs with different characteristics? And finally, a third set of questions relates to what else might be needed. So given what's currently in place, is there a robust pipeline to ensure the supply of educators aligns with demand? And how can new entrants to the workforce be supported to ensure their development and advancement? Next slide, please. So there are some existing data sources that can provide some of this information, both at the educator and program levels, but we know there are limitations to these data, both in terms of their coverage and the extent to which they can be linked. And there are also data from other agencies outside of EEC that could help answer some of these questions. However, accessing and using those data require data sharing agreements, not all of which are currently in place. Next slide, please. So the question is, how can we move from the data we have to the data we really need to answer these questions? We've identified a few key strategies just based on a review of what currently exists, and also scanning successful approaches and best practices identified by experts in the field. The first really is that it's important to minimize the burden on educators and also show them how the data they provide can be used to improve their experiences. Next is that the data need to be as comprehensive as possible, or at least understanding who might be missing from the data, and also capturing changes over time. Third is that given what we know about how much the workforce changes over time, having the ability to conduct ongoing real-time analysis is useful. And that means it's helpful to collect data, especially for key indicators, through administrative data systems rather than through one-time studies or surveys to the extent possible. And I'll just say, I know we'll be hearing about the new educator portal next, which aims to address many of these points, especially these first 3 points. There are 2 other strategies to complement these first 3, as well as the portal development effort. The first is capitalizing on existing data systems. I think the portal is going to aim to integrate and improve upon most of the existing educator level data systems that I listed on an earlier slide, and also envisions linking to program level data wherever possible. But it also is worth exploring how data from other agencies can complement or supplement what will be in the educator portal. And that can help inform thinking around what needs to be collected directly through the portal versus information that can come from other sources. And then finally, continuing to build capacity for measurement, data management, and analysis. And what this really means is planning not just for the collection of the data, but also planning for what to do with the data in the portal once it's been collected. How those data can translate to metrics to help answer the priority questions related to the workforce. This also means thinking about whether there might be additional metrics to track on an ongoing basis and developing those measures and a plan for collecting them. Next slide, please. So we are very excited to be embarking on at least some of this work through a current partnership with EEC. And our partnership is focused on building data and research capacity through a set of key tasks that includes assessing the existing data that's available, identifying the gaps in the workforce information that exists, examining how the existing data systems and data collection approaches can be improved to better answer the questions, and developing ways to measure and analyze outcomes or activities that may not currently be captured. And this work is currently supported by a federal grant from the Administration for Children and Families at the Department of Health and Human Services. So we do hope to have a chance to come back and share more about this work as it progresses. And I'll just note that there's a QR code on this slide that will take you to more information about our partnership, as well as to the full paper, which includes more examples of how the strategies that I described have been implemented in other places. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Great. Thanks very much, Pia. I think, listen, you can take the slides down briefly and just check to see if there are any questions or anything that anybody in this group wants to call out that resonated from the points that Pia made, or from your own experiences working with our data systems and trying to use our data. Yep, Heidi.
Oh, it sounds exciting and it will be lovely to see how all of this proceeds. I think as I tried to navigate the PQ registry as it related to drivers and my education staff over the past couple of days, I'm really looking forward to seeing that be upgraded and revised. So just sort of I don't think I'm alone in that for the concepts. But one of the things that I was wondering about as well was how do the differences in the different types of program models fit into the concept. So for example, family childcare is going to be different from out of school time, which is different from a early learning center. And I was just wondering how you're thinking about incorporating those different, not only qualifications and experiences, but just how that manifests itself in the different types of settings. So,
yeah, I think one thing that we have been thinking about, well, there are a few pieces to that. So the first is the fact that right now in our current system, family childcare educators sit in one system, our educators sit in a different system, and our out of school time educators actually really aren't reflected anywhere terribly well. So by moving into a new centralized system around a centralized credential that is inclusive of all different program types and educator types, it provides us with an opportunity to address that really fundamental problem out of the gate, so that we have one system that is reflecting all of the educators that work in different parts of our system. The other part that we're thinking about too is the ways in which we are connecting educators to where they work. So under not just having a system that tells us who's in the field, maybe, because we all know our PQR registry has lots of people who are once in the field, or maybe we're thinking about being in the field, but we don't actually know who is actually currently in the field. So, that's an important thing to understand. And it's also important to understand where are people working and which program type and which types of roles. So we're also looking into the linkage, and Jesse will talk about this more, but the ways in which a system can link across systems so that we have the ability to connect educators to their role and their program type, and not just sort of have them as a list of individual people with some qualifications. Maybe we can go to Jesse's presentation and then
another hand up.
sorry,
Jessica.
Thank you for noticing me. So I had a question in regards to the presentation and the study. Can you tell us a little bit more in regards to the sample size that you were looking at? Was that just a analysis and an evaluation of already research that's been published in regards to how long? And then I also want to know what is kind of the consensus in regards to paying participants, specifically teachers. Thank you.
Jessica, was that a question about the first maybe the first background slide I shared with information
Yes.
about wages? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, these are all from existing publications. So actually some of it pulls from the Massachusetts Workforce Survey from 2019. So it's various sources actually, and the paper has the citations for it. I'm sorry, I didn't include it here, but it's from existing papers. So some of it are Massachusetts specific, the ones on the Massachusetts side of the slide, and some of them are based on national data.
Can I ask a follow-up then?
Yeah, sure.
So since you were able to look at so many, was there a #1 trend amongst the ones that you presented? Was compensation #1 consistent across the board, or was there other things that were coming from the policy information that you guys were collecting?
in terms of
Go
important
ahead.
features to understand, like important characteristics or features of
Yes.
educators' experiences to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think certainly compensation is a very big dimension of the educator experience that's consistent in the literature, and as I described on that other slide, there is very much also the recognition that it's a multi-dimensional. You have to think about how all of these things go together.
All right, why don't we go to Jesse's presentation, which I think then brings us back to another layer of a discussion about where we want to go and specifically what we want to collect.
Sounds good. And as we're transitioning to that slide, I'll just explain my title very briefly. So I'm Jessie Murray. I am EEC's Chief Product Officer. And if you hear that and go, what? You're not alone. Basically, in software, product management is the connection point between the technology and the business goals. So we sit at that kind of bridge point between the program policy side and the IT side and say, hey, what do you want to achieve with the technology? And then we talk to technology and say, here's what we're trying to do. Let's talk about the different ways that we can do it and figure out what the best way to do it is. And so as you're looking at EEC's technology, you may recognize that there are a lot of ways to achieve different workflows, tasks, actions that you want to do. And in many cases in the past, EEC did not necessarily choose the easiest on the end user way to do it for various reasons. Maybe sometimes it was very focused on one workflow and something else got added later on. Policies have evolved, technology has evolved, but where that has brought us to today is that EEC actually has a pretty big technology footprint that I'm sure many of you have had to interact with. And a lot of those technical systems don't talk to each other very well. And not only that, they're hard to use. They don't necessarily follow the patterns that you expect just by using your computer or your phone and going about your day on the internet, checking your email, doing other tasks that you associate with being connected. And so what we're trying to do overall is get EEC out of, 2005 and into 2025 in terms of the technology by really putting the end user as the center point. And so what we know is that if we think about how an actual person is going to use these systems, it usually connects a lot of those workflows. It's not, I need to do this task in PQ and that's it. It's, I need to do this task in PQ. Oh, wait, I need to go look up this data over here. And oh, let me double check this thing over here. And figuring out that entire user journey and how to facilitate that is what makes the difference between something that technically achieves what it's supposed to and what actually makes a system that you're not going to get a headache at the end of. And so as we're thinking about these tech modernization efforts, we're looking at the educator portal today specifically, but we're trying to do this across the board. And we see a lot of opportunity to really build patterns across, for instance, we're actually going to be doing the family portal at the same time as the educator portal. Educators who may be applying for financial assistance will be able to see the same sorts of login patterns, the same sort of application patterns. But we have these principles that we want to get back to. One, we want to reduce the administrative burden. Working in EEC's technical systems, it may be my day job, but for most people, it's not where they want to spend the majority of their time. So we want to focus on what gets you in and out and successful quickly. So how can we be opportunistic about what you're already doing? How can we not make you learn a whole new way of doing something just for EEC? If you know to like click, hit submit here, let's not make you do a tap dance, delete, click, enter over there. More than that, we want to meet people where they are. We know that our educator population and our constituent population more generally is broad and diverse. We want to make sure that we're putting the burden on us to make a system that meets users' needs instead of asking people who are doing work in all of these different ways to figure out, oh, I don't have good connectivity. I need to go to the library so that I can make this website actually load because it wasn't thought about in terms of Western Mass. We want to think about a lot of educators don't have English as their first language, so language access needs to not be an afterthought. A lot of folks nowadays don't have a laptop. They do stuff primarily on their phone. And so we don't want them to have to try to make a laptop layout work on a phone. We want a layout that elegantly changes between a laptop and a phone and works for you regardless. And overall, we want to reduce all of those silos. So a lot of what Pia was talking about earlier, what Jocelyn was talking about earlier, there's both this user burden of, hey, which system do I need to go to for this thing? But also, if on the underneath, in the undercarriage of our systems, we're not talking to each other, you can't actually get to the research data to actually get those insights that you need to do effective interventions, effective work, actually understanding where the workforce is. So, how can we get people in and out of the system, meet them where they are, and reduce those silos? Let's put those at the forefront. Can you move to the next slide, please? And so specifically with the educator portal, what we are aiming to do is get a very initial version out the door quickly, and then build on that. And so this initial version is going to really focus on the credentialing process. This is partially, we think that this is going to be a really key reason why educators will come to the educator portal. And, if you build it, they will come if they find it useful, is the caveat. But also, we think that there are a lot of really cool integrations that we can build on top of that after. So this initial version, we want to be able to, if you're net new, if you're a current educator, if you're just hoping to become an educator, you can apply for a credential. You can convert one of your existing certifications. And I think Ellen will get into some of the mechanics of the timelines and credential in her presentation as well. And moreover, once you have a credential, you can keep proof of it in our system and know it's going to be there when you need to bring it up to your employer, etc. And you don't have to have a printer, you don't have to have a file box, like it is just there associated with your profile. But where we think that we can get some really powerful scenarios is where we get these subsequent versions that we're going to be adding on. So from the very start, building in, we're re-procuring our learning management system, Strong Start, to get a new and even better one that we can integrate into the portal. Doing things like reducing administrative overhead. So if you have taken a Strong Start course, we have record of it in Strong Start. That if that applies to your credential, we automatically pass that through. You don't have to type it in again. A lot of things where it's like if we already know the information, we don't have to ask it of the educator again. And as Jocelyn was talking about, we want to get more of a sense of the workforce as it stands today and what that kind of living, breathing experience is. Where are people going? Are they moving geographically? Are they moving up in rank? Are they moving in and out of the field? And so having integrations with, for example, our licensing system LEAD will allow us to associate educators with actual programs, both benefiting, EEC and research data partners, but also potentially if we want to ever say, hey, this program has, this many credentialed employees on the childcare search, it can be used as a point of advertising on our childcare search. So thinking about those double benefits. Similarly, integrating with our background check system, reminding educators, hey, your background check is going to be up for renewal soon. You might want to do something about that so that your boss doesn't come, knocking on your door and getting mad that you're overdue, and not waiting until our licensors are there. But also supporting licensors and having an easy view of whose background checks are up to date with that kind of staff list already there, minimizing the need for paper. And really, I think the sky's the limit here in terms of where we can go. But what we want to do with all these functionalities is not do it because it's new and cool and we can, but because it serves an actual need, whether it serves a need for the educator or it serves a need for EEC, and the educator gets some benefit, because we know they're not going to do something just for our benefit, but we need to balance those things. We want to have this really driven in how people actually will use our system, how they think about their careers, and what they're hoping to get out of that interaction with EEC. You can advance to the next slide. And part of how we'll do that kind of back and forth, like I said, we're going to be doing this very lightweight initial version. You may hear me, if you talk to me in a conversation, talk about MVP. What that means is the minimum viable product. But basically, it's the smallest bit of functionality that actually shows benefit to the user. And we do these cycles in human-centered design where basically each step of the way, we want to add value to what we're releasing out into the world. So we have an idea, we start designing it, we validate it with real users, with people who interact with educators, with actual educators themselves. We test it with them both for, software bugs, that kind of things, but just for usability purpose. Do people understand what we're getting at when they come at it with fresh eyes? Because sometimes if you're in this day in and day out, you're like, of course that makes sense, when to everyone else, it's a convoluted mess. And so just continually checking those assumptions to make sure that we're pointed in a way that is going to help the field and help EEC achieve their goals in terms of building out the workforce, giving them a dignified career path for longevity, and building into this larger picture of both EEC modernization, like I talked about earlier, but also the Commonwealth. So not trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of login. We're going to be building into the shared login that you will be able to use for making an appointment at the DMV. And if you've already entered your name and address there, you don't have to enter it again. What we want to do, there's a quote that good design is 99% invisible. We want to be invisible in many ways. But we also want to build this with educators, not for educators, and with assumptions underlying that. And so we're really trying to take this from a user-centered focus, from an iterative agile focus, and with that equity lens. All of these usability sessions will be compensated for people's time, so that we can, like I said, take us out of 2005 in the technology realm and get us to the future day. I'm happy to transition to questions here. I know you're going to get a whole lot more on the specifics of the credential soon enough, but really excited with what's to come on the technology side.
Thank you, Jesse. I think we can transition out of the deck for a little while, and I will stay in a sort of discussion mode for a little while. So I invite all the members of the Workforce Council who are able to come on camera, because we are going to spend a little time, I think, just chatting. The next part of this is supplemental to really thinking about the IT system that we're developing and building, and what that looks like and how it functions. Cheryl. Yep, you're muted, Cheryl.
There we go. Sorry, the little thing was covering it. Cheryl from Macy. So I know you touched upon it. I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. So the portal will be translated into multiple languages.
Yes.
Okay.
So the approach that I anticipate us taking is that we'll take a machine generated translation as a baseline. So something like Google Translate or similar, to kind of populate the initial set of text that we can swap in, but then have someone who is a native speaker actually review that and say, oh, hey, that synonym doesn't make sense here, do
Yep.
some edits so that it makes sense from a human perspective, and then build that into our ongoing deployment process moving forward. Because we know
And-
language access is
Yep.
big with this population.
And then I just have a couple other ones so you had said that it would give you notifications for like their background checks. Can they set up, or is there ability to set up notifications for different things like CPR and first aid if they haven't hit their annual PD hours? So it's not like, hurry up and get this done the last day before it expires, before it's due, or before a licensor is coming out, right? And then, and I believe I heard you say it's going to be not connected, but it will be available on the portal for educators to directly apply for the EEC scholarship.
So I'll address both of those things. So
Thank
I think just to clarify, for both of those features, for notifications and the scholarship, probably won't be available day one, but those are things that we anticipate will be on the roadmap as we move forward. So I think for the scholarship, what's nice about that is if we're using this profile of, hey, this is who the Commonwealth knows you to be, if we can essentially stamp that with, we know they're an educator, that can kind of carry through to the family portal. So they'll probably do most of their applying in the family portal, but we'll have that linkage that, there'll be an entry point and then they'll get pushed to the front of the line. That's something that will
Can
need
I
to be
check which
prioritized and worked through.
scholarship?
So.
Sorry, can I just check which scholarship you were asking about?
The
Cheryl?
state scholarship, the EEC
The-
state scholarship.
It's for childcare or for access to
Childcare.
care? Gotcha,
Child,
okay.
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. To take college courses, higher ed,
Oh, okay.
higher education in early childhood.
Got it. I think that is something that we would need to figure out the roadmap, just because there's a little bit more complexity with the DHE part of that.
Yep.
But I think that is something that we could consider, whether, it's a simple link or if it's something more integrated.
Well, I'm guessing it would help with the data piece of it as well, because if it was linked, you could pull, who's applying for it, who applied for it and used it, who applied for it and didn't use it, how many credits are they taking, like I'm just thinking data wise
Yeah.
that way as well.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
think there's a lot of like long-term stuff, even thinking about coming kind of back in, as people are applying for credentials, are there partnerships that we can establish with some of our schools where we get e-transcripts automatically, so that people don't have to, figure out, do I have the official transcript or the unofficial transcript? They can just indicate, this is my institution, and get it populated in. So there's a lot where I think we can work through kind of what is the ordering in which we would implement those features, and who are the partners and stakeholders and like the specific interactions. I think there's a lot of power here. And then for the notification piece, I think similarly, the idea of, hey, your background check is, needs renewal. I think that's something that we have a concept of it right now, and that's something that we would probably start to validate in terms of basic user research. Is this something that, talking to programs first, do you find that your staff are sometimes scrambling to do this last minute and they have to take a sick day to go get fingerprinted? What would the ideal window be to remind you? Do you need 2 reminders? Do we need to do text message notification first or in-app notification first? So again, it's at this point more of a kind of future notion that we can put on the roadmap. But I think all of those details are things that we work through with the end users and with the stakeholders to get to that, what is going to be most effective and most helpful for the most amount of people.
Perfect. Thank you.
Those of you working in the field, either thinking about yourself as an individual educator or somebody running a program, are there other aspects of this? And Steve, I see you have your hand up too, so I'll call on you a second. But like, it would be really great to get ideas about these types of linkages, so there's like ways we could facilitate processes and make things easier for educators, and thinking about commonly conducted processes across different systems that we could integrate under one, portal and login, but also what might be helpful in a dashboard, like what types of notifications would be particularly helpful. Steve.
Thank you. And Jocelyn, that's exactly where I was going. First of all, let me say, I really appreciate that it's thought out and planned for future. There's like, it's in logical phases, and it's not going to end. Hopefully it won't end up being like many of the old systems that sort of were like square peg round hole the day they were rolled out. So they never really quite did what they were supposed to do or what they were envisioned to do. So maybe the first stupid question I have, programs would have access to this for our staff too, right? This is an independent EEC and our staff. If someone works in one of our centers, can we get to it too, or is this just for staff?
So I'll let Jocelyn speak as well on this. I think what we're starting out with is this very educator focused view, and we'll be able to rethink how the data structures are and work through that in terms of what the data sharing agreements are, that sort of thing. But also from kind of our product perspective, we want to think about what is the more program side of the experience. So are there things like when we associate an educator with a particular program, is that something that we want a program administrator to, also do like a thumbs up to, or do we want them to indicate, hey, this person is no longer employed? I think we're trying to figure out what those interactions make sense from the EEC, but we're trying to find that boundary in terms of there are going to be certain things that are just on your end of the software that you use for QuickBooks or staff, etc., those sorts of things, and just finding that line between here's a provider-centric experience with the educators, and that is facilitated by EEC, and here's where the ball's in your court, basically.
Yeah.
So
I'm just
that's
curious
kind of
what you would want
TBD.
to. Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what concretely would you want to be able to do? I mean, it's obviously an educator. The core of this is the educator's registry, and they maintain that for themselves. But we're thinking about the linkages and the ways in which programs do have access to this information.
So for me, we'd like to be able to get updated trainings that they do. So they do the trainings, they don't actually have to print it out and walk it over and hand it to us, and then we put it in a folder. So it's not this mystery system that we don't have access to. And excuse me, and the risk if that happens is it becomes more and more like, and I'll use the example for me, and it maybe is just me, my LinkedIn, right? And no one goes on LinkedIn until they're about to look for a job, right? And so is this going to be that? But we want to make sure it doesn't evolve into that where they're plugging away, they're doing their job, they're an amazing teacher, we love them, they're doing great. Then they don't have to go on this until they get a notification that their BRC needs to be done or something like that. How can we work together with you to keep relevant content to put in? Maybe there's messaging we put in on a dashboard about upcoming holidays, or I think we both think of different things when we talk about teacher retention. I think about teacher retention at my centers at VOC. EEC wants to just make sure they're in the field. So we may have different messaging we put in to try and make sure that our teachers feel supported. We could put, we have we have messages we send out. We have, our mental health supports that we offer. We send them in emails. We could put them through maybe a screen here. it could be a very powerful tool if we're a part of it. And it could be kind of like LinkedIn if it's just another thing for them to remember a login to. That's the risk I would throw out there.
So what I think I hear you saying, which is interesting, is you're sort of thinking about all the different ways you communicate with, connect with your educators, and like, how can we centralize it through this mechanism so it's not just one of many different tools that educators are using, that it becomes something that's centralized and usable for them. I hadn't thought about the idea of individual programs actually using it as a line of communicating to their educators, but it's interesting to think about sending messages. Also, I mean, Jesse, like, shut me down if I'm like talking crazy here, but like, could we create a system where you can suggest trainings or, really like use it in real time to work together?
Exactly. And as a multi-service agency, right, we use ADP, and ADP does a nice job of communicating, when have a delayed opening or something like that. But if there's a early education specific thing going on, we don't have an easy way to communicate to them. So this could be an avenue for that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of directions to explore here, and I really appreciate you giving some specifics there. I think, there are what's called APIs, which you don't need to know this, but stands for Application Programming Interface. It's basically how two applications talk to each other. And so in many cases, the applications that you're already using may have some APIs where if you want to, post a notice to your employee, for example, like we could pipe that in to people who are designated a certain way. I'm riffing here that this may or may not be something that we want to prioritize right away, but I think there's a lot where we can really think, again, stepping back to how do people actually use the systems that they use, go about their daily work, because like you said, you can build something, that seems amazing, but no one's ever going to use it if they don't find value in it in their day-to-day work. And so thinking about where those user journeys connect through kind of the EEC world into more of the employer specific world, I think will really help flesh out some of those future directions.
Sure.
Sorry, one more thought just came. Is this going to be, when you said that they access it through their mobile device, is it going to be an app or is it going to be just software?
So the way that we are thinking about this is that it will not be an app. So you would be able to use it through your mobile browser.
Okay.
Basically, I don't know about you. I feel like I have to download a new app like every day to like go to my movie theater, my corner store, my hotel. And so there are a lot of ways right now where you can make it so that websites basically can identify what kind of device they're on and just seamlessly realign their content to
so there'll be no issue with like an Android or an app or an Apple phone or whatever. So great. Thank you.
And that also allows us to move quicker and have kind of one team working on it rather than we have the desktop team and the Android team and the iOS team. So it keeps us a little leaner and more agile as well.
Are there other things that anybody wants to put on a wish list? Heidi?
Yeah, thinking about what Steve was talking about, some of the things that I could see us using the portal for would be to follow up with staff who might be due for something, or going through accreditation. We need to determine what the level of education that everybody has. So if we could be able to see all of that, I think of a lot of our staff who are newer to the field or less comfortable with technology, and helping them enter the information or follow up with the information. I would love to use it to help determine what professional development the staff has taken independently and be able to design or figure out what our thoughts would be for professional development that we might do shared or that type of concept. Sure, we would love to say that all of our educators are going to be able to enter the information and do it all perfectly, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And so for us to be able to access that, I think would be really important.
Jessica?
So I own a family childcare program, and we currently use an app in order to check our families in and out. So things of that nature, in which the providers are, you guys are actually asking for what we're using. So we're using technology to communicate with parents, to check children in and out, to communicate sickness. So these are things that in all of anything that should be done should actually be used instead of providers like myself having to pay a third party. So I would just recommend that you guys actually look at those third parties and see what they're providing providers, because they're already selling to us and using us to make profit, where something like this would actually go a very long way and not should only be used for data collection, but actually to enhance the businesses and to make sure that if I have a question for my licensor, I don't need to send an email, that I can send it directly and not just the licensor seeing it, everyone in the department, if it's an emergency. I think there's so much use that's not being provided directly to us that you guys need to step in and actually ask what providers are using technology in. Are you using it for payroll? Are you using it to get paid? And that's where it will actually support the field rather than doing what we have done before, which is just trying to do data collection. So what I would suggest is definitely communication, but not in just one way. I also would say that if the department is going to support us with this, having even the brand support us behind, that we're not just a program in the community, we're also licensed by EEC, like this is who we stand for, and really connecting technology to the people who are using it daily, but also not just like everybody's reiterating setting up a system that's going to fail, but also like somebody else mentioned, like using it as a tool to motivate each other and to support each other and to hear all of the great meetings that the commissioner is hosting and all the information that should be given to providers in real time and not via an email that they might not see or get to, especially if it's information. Like for one last example is I would love to know like the regulations that the licensors are looking at so that I know what to prepare for. It shouldn't be random. I should know what the policies and the regulation changes are in real time, not just when I'm getting a randomized inspection of my program. So things of that nature could go a long way. And if you guys have any specific questions for me, I'd love to continue to share.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jessica. And I will plug that we are going to be looking for providers like yourself to participate in usability and user research moving forward, again, compensating you for your time. And so I would say be on the lookout for communications soliciting that kind of help, because we would really love to dig into a lot of that moving forward.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I think also, and I don't know if Stephen can maybe back us up, my program up, is if we could create some system of like, if we need fill-in or emergency care or like just additional hands or stuff like that, like if it was the state helping us facilitate that, we could really do that and not have to close programs down for the day, or not have to whatever, have a whole bunch of adults leave their work to pick up children, like just things of that nature. And I know this has been already expressed of a need of like a system for extra assistance or to hire and things of that sort, but I haven't seen it done. And I haven't seen it at least in conversation, but I think if we don't have the people filling in the spaces through which they're already licensed, it's really going to be hard for independent programs to consistently and at the highest quality fill educators.
Yeah, that's a great piece of feedback. I'll hand it to Jocelyn in a second, but just before I do, I want to really reiterate that our technology and all the changes that we make in that space should be in service of you all doing your work. caring for children, making sure that your businesses are healthy, and it shouldn't feel like we are just extracting data from you. Data can do a lot, that's really powerful, and can point us in directions of where we do interventions and blah blah blah. But really, with the shift that my team is trying to do on the technology side, is really think about the end user as that core person that needs to come first. So whether it's the educators for the educator portal, whether it's families for childcare financial assistance, the stakeholder scenarios that EEC cares about are important, but they can't come at the expense of those core users. Like, we don't want to, it needs to be better than a do no harm situation. We need to make your lives easier. So getting suggestions like, how do I make it not feel like it's a moving target? How does this actually help me in my day-to-day? How does this integrate with what I'm already doing? It's really powerful, and that will help us be successful. So I really, really, really want to reiterate that, like, it is so important to have a partnership on this, because we don't want to speak for you or build something for you without your input. And so thank you. I'll turn it over to Jocelyn, because I know she's been thinking more about some of that sub care sort of thing.
Yeah, and although I see Steve's hands up, so Steve.
I just to respond to Jessica.
Yeah.
Some systems do that, and you may be in the VOC system, Jessica. I don't know everyone in our system, so I'll just say that out loud and apologize if that's the case. But backup care, things like that, some systems, many systems do already. So as we're designing the family side of this, age in systems to. Did I disappear? Oh, okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Yep, sure.
It's important to engage the systems to figure out what our contractual is, but we're contractually required to do some of these things. So keeping the systems informed as it's evolving is great, because I think we all have different systems. All systems have different systems to deal with these things and how to pay folks and everything in between. So
Yeah, I'm hearing, and this makes a lot of sense, is like, could you help us centralize, coordinate, and organize? So I think, Jesse's point about thinking about what are the systems that you already use and where are opportunities to work through the API process and to create links and integrations, so that we're not just layering something new, not just a new app and a new logon, but like a new system and a different, separate, unconnected process. I will also say, a lot of this work is going to be about sequencing. So, having a vision for the long term and where we want to go with this is really important. I do think the other thing that will be important for us to hear from you are around some of the priorities, and sort of like, because it does feel really super important that we don't start out of the gate with something that is solely for our purposes, but that is useful on the ground for educators and for programs. So thinking about, where should we be focusing our attention with that MVP around the most core processes that it would be helpful to integrate into this is going to be an important part of the conversation as well. Any other thoughts or suggestions or just questions that you have about where we're going with this? There's a lot of opportunity for co-designing, so I think we're very excited about that. And I'm having trouble looking at both attendees and my chat. There's a question in the Q&A about who is the intended user, which is an interesting question, because I think we've just talked about trying to think about a system that's integrated across a few different intended users, but it does remind us all that the focus of the educator portal is to support educators in tracking their own ongoing professional growth, providing the information that they need to provide for working in the field. And I think, Steve, to your point, also getting the information that they need to understand what to do next and where to go and how to work both with our systems, but also with the systems of the programs that they're working in.
Yeah, and I will say, one of the exercises that we were doing similar to this on the family side, we were talking about how families were kind of the main end user for the family portal. But, you know, programs and CCR&Rs also really mattered. We didn't want to make something super easy for the families, but not very easy for the programs and CCR&Rs, because that can, you know, lead to delays, blah, 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 blah. And then EEC is a stakeholder as well. And so there's kind of this tiered, here's who you focus on. And sometimes it may be feature by feature. Here's who you want to make sure you're not, as you're looking through the options, that you're at least doing no harm for, and here's where you can have kind of secondary benefits. And so, like Jocelyn said, Educator Portal very much directed at the educator, but as we prioritize these specific functionalities and interactions, we'll be thinking about, you know, who gets the secondary benefit, how do we optimize for these other stakeholders as well.
Thanks, Jesse. And another thing that we've been thinking a lot about is how do we design a system that supports an educator in moving into the field and sort of through their life as a professional, or at least hopefully at least a good portion of their life as a professional if we retain them. And I'm just curious if anybody has thoughts or suggestions as well in thinking about, you know, what supports would be helpful for bringing educators into our system and supporting them and getting the information that they need to continue on. We can keep talking and thinking about that. And also we will obviously reach out directly to educators too and have the same conversation.
What is interesting is I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry,
go ahead.
Heidi. I saw a hand. I didn't mean to talk over Heidi.
I didn't wait long enough. Sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Steve can go and then I'll go.
So
Sorry.
really, we see new home educators come from two sources. One is organic recruitment. If we're looking within a different community, you go to churches, you go to things of that nature, and you find them. And the other is, you know, friends of home educators or connection to a home educator. So those are the two main paths we would want a hand to hold a potential home educator into the system.
Great. Thank you. Heidi?
I think a couple of things. One is that I regularly get emails from different colleges or professional development opportunities. I think of like Neighborhood Village, it sends out the stuff talking about the new apprenticeship programs or whatever it is. And I try to push that out to all of the staff, but I think it would be great to send that out directly so that it's not, there's, or career pathways grants, whatever it is. So if people aren't signed up for these newsletters or whatever, they can still get that information and learn about the professional development. I think another thing that would be also very helpful is stuff about self-care, stuff about mental health for themselves, how to work through potential challenges. A lot of organizations have some employee assistance programs, but sometimes those do not necessarily meet the needs of the educators, or even just how to deal with conflict or how to work with some challenges that might come up that they might not want to go through their employer or something else. So to be able to access those types of resources or opportunities, and even if it's just the potential of saying an article about some, you know, deep breathing exercises or things of that nature, those types of things could be helpful.
Thank you, Heidi. Cheryl?
Sorry. I also, to piggyback what Heidi had said, maybe a PD calendar where, you know, just something very easy where if people want to submit, you know, whatever your requirements are around that. And then I'm thinking, I also am the program director at Fisher College, so just kind of flipping that hat right now, but for higher ed is to almost have, I don't want to say a life coach or whatever, but a lot of times people are at their educators, even at Fisher, we find they're getting information from chatbots or from Googling, and they're having a difficult time getting in touch with a physical person to kind of help guide them and coach them on accessing the EEC scholarship, accessing what courses do I need, what courses should come next. And so if there could be some sort of accessibility for maybe some sort of credential coaching, maybe, or higher ed coaching, I think would be great.
Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about where we can put a navigator role at EEC, which is slightly different than the higher ed support, but we've also been thinking about, sort of how are we supporting people in finding their pathway, and then also getting people to the supports with the particular pathway and continuing on, particularly connecting people into the right person at a college where you will go, stay at a college and really be able to get the benefit of the advisory supports that are available there. But that we need something first that, sort of helps get people there.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I think maybe at this point we can transition to the credentialing discussion. And Ellen, I'll turn it over to you.
Great to see everyone. Thanks, Jocelyn. Thanks, Jesse. We can go to the next slide. We just really wanted, you've seen this slide before, and all of the activity and work that we've been doing on the credential. And as you can see, there's so many intersections of important pieces that you've actually been discussing right now. And it's everything from training to professional development, to the communication to the field, and finding ways that educators and administrators and directors in the field can really deepen their knowledge and skill and find the information that is important to them in relevant and timely ways. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, as you heard from Jesse, the IT business systems. It's where we are now. And importantly, so much of our work will be related to communications and how we share information with the field, and how this technology that Jesse just described can really help in many ways, provide visual guidance and, alleviate any worry about where we are currently and in our current state with certification, and where we're going future state with credentialing. So we can move to the next slide.
I think actually before you, Ellen, before you move, I just want to call out sort of from a structural perspective, the way we are approaching the credentialing system. I know we talked about it before, but I think it just sort of helps to navigate where we are right now, is that we're phasing in the design work, and we start by defining the competencies and the expectations around the competencies. And we've done a lot of work on that front for educators at the levels that are commensurate with the levels that we currently have called out in teacher and lead teacher certification. And then from those, then we're developing what we'll talk a little bit more about, is sort of like, what does that pathway look like? What's the verification process going to look like? And what are the opportunities to advance in that system? And then the next step for us that we've already started on, but we're not talking about much today, is going through the same process for those in educational leadership roles, administrative roles, coaching and mentoring type roles. So that's going to sort of mirror this process that we're going through with the educator levels, but we're not yet at a point where we're ready to talk about the details for that level, but it is very much on our mind and in development.
Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. So as Jocelyn said, a lot of what we've been thinking about are the ways in which educators can navigate both either a higher education pathway or a professional development pathway, and then also taking into account that there could be intersections with both. And so we want to make sure that there's opportunity for both professional development training and applied application of that training, and then also a clear pathway and entryway to degrees in higher education through practicums, apprenticeships, and certificates. And then, as I said, the professional development pathway, what we're really looking at is the training that can contribute to approved packages within the competencies that we've been developing. And currently, we're really focused on that level 1, level 2 teacher, lead teacher competencies. and also taking into account years of experience and what educators bring to the field currently and what they may want to pursue or explore further in the future credentialing opportunity. Jocelyn, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I just highlighting again that for the higher ed pathway, what we're trying to move away from is what we have now, where we have a system that is encouraging editors to take these one-off credit-bearing courses. That the higher education pathway is a pathway to certificates and degrees through higher education. And we're supporting educators in a very intentional way into entering into that pathway, understanding it, sort of preparing themselves to engage fully, committing and connecting to a college, and taking advantage of all the support systems that are available to stay and continue on and be successful in that pathway, while also recognizing that there are educators for whom higher education, for a host of reasons, does not make sense, either at one moment in time, so you might move between these two pathways, or for many other reasons. Like, for example, somebody who already has a bachelor's or even a master's in a non-related field might not want to go back into higher education, but still needs the ongoing professional learning that's important for supporting the work on the ground. So that is the thinking behind simultaneously developing a professional development pathway.
Yeah, and I would just add the other piece to this is, and we've shared this briefly before, but that we've been working with the 15 community colleges in Massachusetts and looking at a foundational certificate that's comprised of 16 credits. It's 4 courses in a practicum, and they've come to agreement on that. So what's nice about that is that the courses, the first course, the second course, and those courses, subsequent courses, will fit right into that certificate, and then the certificate directly contributes to a degree. So it's nice that way. And then the other piece that we're looking at is professional development that can be accounted for and used towards credit for prior learning. And so that someone who maybe is in the professional development pathway that would like to then consider the higher ed pathway, there's again, as Jocelyn said, intersection between the two. We can go on to the next slide. So this is a graphic design of how we're looking at, and you may have seen an earlier version of this, but what we're trying to do here is to illustrate movement, that educators can start their career with us and then continue to move through upper levels of credentialing, and then also explore and pursue endorsements in areas of high interest as they move through their career. And I think what's important to note about this is that within each of these credential levels, we've also taken into account where current certification would land. And so that the field understands, and this will be part of our communication campaign, that what they're doing now and the certifications they have, the investment and time that they've made in the field will be accounted for and included in the new system. And in part of what Jesse was talking about is that in that new educator portal is to be able to take what they already have probably in our system and help make sense of it and just automate it so that it lands in the new system, and that they can also see how their work has already been accounted for and contribute to their credentialing levels.
Yeah, and I think I just want to call out here what has been really interesting in both figuring out what the system should look like, but also how to represent it on, one slide, is that it is no longer the linear system that we've had where you get teacher and then lead teacher and then director 1, director 2. It is really recognizing the diversity of opportunities. There's a sort of core educator pathway, which is from educator to level 2, where you're really working in the classroom or the program or the home and working closely with children and developing your skills and working with children. But over time, educators might have many different ways that they want to stay in the field and develop the expertise that they have. They might want to stay in the classroom and continue to grow as a professional, and that should be recognized. But all of these other roles, like being a leader, being a mentor, we could think about coaches or specialists, These are all opportunities that are somewhat slightly different in terms of the skill set and the expectations associated with them and the training needed to get to that position. And we're trying to figure out how to represent a broader range of options for educators, and also, sort of recognize and guide with a credential. And then also calling out to, we don't intend to stop here, but we really do need to take bite-sized pieces and get something out that is sufficient for our needs right now and representative of some of the directions that we're going in as a field. But we are continuing to we're planning to continue to as we launch this stage, thinking about what the next phase could be. What else could we be paying attention to? How much more expertise might we expect educators? We want to reflect, and how many more opportunities do we want to create a system of support for educators in their ongoing professional learning?
And I would just add the other piece to this that is different from current state to future state is that currently we've never had a recertification or a renewal. And in the new system, in the new credentialing system, we intend to have a renewal of credentials or credential levels, and through that offer professional development that inspires the educator to continue to identify, not only through, as Jocelyn said, as we look at those level 1, 2, and 3, those positions and the work and training and professional development within those levels is very much related to classroom practice and direct interaction with children. And where we're looking at endorsements of beyond director and administrator, but those other types of roles and responsibilities that can really reinforce and support those coming in at entry level 1 and 2, and provide professional development for those that have a deeper experience and level of knowledge.
And I think that also is an important point, Ellen, and also calls out the opportunity that we have as we're revising regulations at the same time that we're doing this. I mean, not only does it allow us to really make the significant revision that we need for creating the credential, it also allows us to think about, what might we have written in regs that we would actually want to absorb into the credential. So Ellen talked about the renewal process of like that ongoing expectation for ongoing professional learning is really a credential function, not a licensing function. So we could sort of think about how we transition those ongoing professional development hours into the credential, and also provide a framework for that provides some direction on how to use those effectively to support one's professional growth.
And the other piece before we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to mention is that, and it was mentioned earlier, I think in both Pia and Jesse's presentations, is that the credentialing is different from certification in that we're looking at family childcare, we're looking at group and center, and then out of school time. And so taking into account the diversity of the field and the different types of roles, responsibilities, and even titles, it's different, it's broader, and so as we look at how we can take into account those specialization and the kinds of things that would inspire different types of educators to pursue other types of endorsements, it's a really important piece to this work. And so we have been engaged in the work with stakeholders. And I think that might be the next slide, around who we've been working with and how we have been looking at the competencies and stakeholder engagement. So we have developed a workforce working group, and the working group is comprised of a cross-section of FCCs and out of school time folks and group and center. And it's been really helpful in not only sharing the competencies and getting feedback and making revisions accordingly, but also to really look at the new credentialing and making sure that the training and the professional development opportunities are relevant and supportive of the unique skill set that each of our sector of the workforce really needs. So this is ongoing, and stakeholder working groups are really important to us. And so we've been sharing and are encouraging folks to participate when they can. So in January, we'll be breaking up the groups into very specific working groups to really go through the competencies as they stand now for final review. The competencies in those entry levels are really have been refined in so that we can get them ready for translation. And then we'll want to take another stab and just make sure that they really make sense and are ready to look at the roles and responsibilities by educator and program type. Do you want to say anything else about that, Jocelyn?
No, I think we could take the slides down and just take any questions that people have or feedback. You could probably tell Ellen and I could talk endlessly about this. We've been reminded not to do that. But feel free to ask any question you have.
That was an extremely brief presentation.
All right, I'll go.
Go.
Sorry. So I saw the endorsements, which I love endorsements. I just am curious because I am the infant toddler
Oh, yeah.
passionate about that. So I just always have to be a voice for babies, right? So I'm just curious as to where that fits in. And then is there discussion about credentialing almost a career level or a trainer level for trainers? Or so I know several different states being involved with PD highly is that some states approve trainings, some states approve trainers. So looking at what that looks like. And then for Macy is so that it would help us as we're discussing planning our next fiscal budget and our annual plan is looking at how we can best serve centers that are already accredited, going through accreditation, and also the educators in that.
Well,
Yeah.
let's have an offline conversation about the Macy
Perfect.
question. I think that is something we should be doing. Let me take the infant and toddler question, Ellen, and then I'll pass it. You can take the trainer and training approval.
Yeah.
So yes, we are thinking about infants and toddlers. It doesn't fit in as neatly into that schematic, and we haven't quite figured out exactly how to do it, but we are looking at having also endorsements by age levels and including multi-age groupings. I think when we think about the competencies and the skills, what we're leaning towards, although again, feedback and thoughts on this are welcome at this point in time because it is complicated, is when you keeping things relatively general at level 1, but at level 2, starting to have expectations that people would be focusing in on trainings and support that are really tightly tied to the children that they would be working with, and that they would have the opportunity to have an endorsement recognizing infant toddler expertise, school age expertise, some combination of those things.
Yeah, and Cheryl, I would say that just as Jocelyn said, as I mentioned that, that entry level 1, 2, and 3, those are, educators working directly with children in classrooms or settings, so that even within the training for that credential level, there could possibly be very specific trainings for infants, toddlers, preschools, out of school time, so that someone who wants to really focus their training hours on a specific age or level. And in some cases, even in the foundational certificate that I mentioned for the higher ed, there is a curriculum course. But what's different about it this time is that you could take infant toddler curriculum or preschool curriculum. In the past, almost everybody took preschool curriculum, and then they took infant toddler as an add-on because it didn't fit into the degree. So what we've done this time is structured the foundational certificate that the colleges will accept either or for degree attainment. And then someone still may take infant toddler and preschool also, but it will be a choice based on what they're doing and where they're working. And they may, in their next renewal, take the other, for example. And then as far as training and trainers, we're in the midst of developing a process for EEC endorsed training, which will include guidelines for requirements for facilitators or trainers. And in that, really thinking a lot about what do trainers need in terms of training to not only, I think what's important to call out is that the training and the training hours are both seat time in training and practice application. so that every training has opportunity for an educator to learn about something and then really put it directly into practice. And so a trainer who can deliver on that content in a training, but also really support an educator as they go off to give it a try, reflect and come back and talk about their practice is different. So we'll really want to create some, thoughtful train the trainer content. And that also there'll be some guidelines around who can deliver on that training. For both the facilitation and the development of the content, especially for EEC endorsed training, because that will contribute to credentialing.
Yep. Thank you. I'm happy to, if, take it offside, if we want to meet, if you want me to join a group, a committee, whatever. I'm here for it. I'm very passionate about it. And just familiar with some other states getting approved and credentialing and that type of stuff. And I totally agree on it's one thing to take a course, but then to be able to implement it into practice is a second step. And I feel that sometimes with COVID, the online rush is missing that next piece, that implementation piece.
And I think that's an important thing to call out, in that the trainings will all have practice application hours, so it's both training time. And then what the institutions of higher ed did was that they structured the foundational certificate to have 4 core courses and a practicum. So it's a 4-credit practicum, and it's early on in the certificate. And then there'll be another practicum later on in the degree. So it will, again, take what they're learning and put it into practice.
And it's a one practicum for 150 hours?
Yes, for the first one. For
Perfect.
the first, within the foundational certificate, yes.
And just speaking from higher ed, because they don't move as quickly in academia. So as much knowledge as I can see you laughing, is as much prior notice as we can get, so that if we do, so at Fisher, we did build our program kind of offering infantile curriculum, preschool curriculum to meet the needs of those different credentials. And now that that's changing, we might be able to put in like an awesome course on play or brain development, because we can now offer, so we can, but we're constricted with meeting with curriculum committee and things like that. So as much prior advanced thing is helpful.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of time, but our plan is to take the next 6 months and really talk very, very frequently and publicly about sort of some of the details of this design and what we're thinking and where we're going, so that the information should be out there. Maybe not in all the specifics and final decisions, but like hopefully enough to get you to start thinking. And then, yes, we do understand. We also expect that there'll be sort of a staggered rollout in terms of what's available to people when, but like ultimately we want as full a constellation of opportunities for educators as we can get, because different people are going to want different things. I think we have 1 minute, but I do want to make sure that the commissioner has an opportunity to just say hello to everybody as she's joined us.
Thanks, everybody. And you know what, Cheryl, we'll be in touch for stakeholder groups, so more to come. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
Amy? Are you not able to unmute? No. Oh, no. Well, I know the commissioner is here and we can all see her, and know that she's happy to be part of this group, and unfortunately seems to be having some technical trouble.
Okay, I think my computer is on the way out. If anyone's tracking Christmas lists, my pad's not working, but I got it with my mouse. Okay, hi everyone. Just wanted to say hello and thank you. It was a great conversation. Sorry I was a little bit late, but really grateful for the partnership. We worry a little bit about the content on this meeting because we have folks who are like in the field and exactly who are going to be affected by the credentials and the work that we're doing, and then others who are sort of around the workforce space. So hopefully we hit the right level for all of you today. I am pretty excited about all the progress on our modernization efforts. If you were on our morning meeting, we're talking about our family portal and our educator portal. So really making progress to bring user experience into it. And obviously the credential work is key to having that educator portal line up exactly with the career pathways that we all have been envisioning. So we are incredibly grateful for your partnership, and we have a board meeting next week, not focused on workforce stuff, but we will be bringing the credential to the board in the new year. So we'll probably see you again before that happens, but have a happy holidays to all of you and your families, and thank you for your partnership again, and we'll see you all very soon.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.